Hello everybody, this is DarkSun9. If you like this video or found it useful, please hit that like button. If you don't want to miss out on our future content, hit the subscribe button. And as always, you can catch us on Twitch every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our live show. Now let's get into the episode. What lurks in the darkness just beyond our sight? Is it a creature, a ghoul, or just our brains creating illusions in an attempt to make sense of our surroundings? We look at the sightings, evidence, and legends that surround the things lurking in the shadows, under your bed, and in your own mind. In this episode, we will be discussing the Dogman, a creature that has possibly been recorded in accounts dating back to the time of the ancient Greeks. While the origins of the Dogman are not known, there are still encounters from the creature in our recent past, even up till today. We are going to share some of these sightings with you, take some of your questions, and share our thoughts on the topic. Sit back, relax, and let's get right into it. I'm Dark. I'm joined by
Uncle Bulge.
And Delphi.
And we're going to jump right into the descriptions of the Dogman. So, over the years, there's been many witness accounts that have the Dogman standing anywhere between 6 foot to 9.5 foot tall, bearing the head of a wolf or a large dog. Many accounts describe them as seeming to be large dogs or coyotes, except upon further inspection, they are significantly larger in comparison to their furry counterparts, while moving on all fours. But this perception is quickly changed once the creature stands on its hind legs, showing their true stature and the realization that the creature has hands, not paws, at the end of its arms. The chest and arms are compared to that of a bodybuilder with a narrowing down toward the waist. A tail can also be seen at the base of their backs just above the hind legs. Now that image is implanted in your mind's eye, let's hear some of the encounters with the Dogman. Dating back to around 400 BC, the Greek physician Ctesias wrote the following passages, which were translated into English, describe the tribes of the Cynocephalus, which are the dog-headed men. They speak no language, but bark like dogs, and in this manner make themselves understood by each other. Their teeth are larger than those of dogs, their nails like those of these animals, but longer and rounder. They inhabit the mountains as far as the river Indus. Their complexion is swarthy. They are extremely just, like the rest of the Indians with whom they associate. They understand the Indian language, but are unable to converse, only barking or making signs with their hands and fingers by way of reply. They live on raw meat, and they number around 120,000. There's another account of the Cynocephali by the explorer Marco Polo, while describing his travels in the island of Angamanen. I probably said that wrong, but we're going to go with it. Angamanen is a very large island. The people are without a king and are idolaters, and no better than wild beasts. And I assure you all, the men of this island, of Angamanen, that island, have heads like dogs and teeth and eyes likewise. In fact, in the face they are just like big mastiff dogs. They have a quantity of spices, but they are a most cruel generation and eat everybody that they can catch, if not of their own race. So that just goes and shows that there's been sightings that date back to around 400 BC of dog-headed men, and which I believe might be the Dogman that we are encountering today. Do you guys have anything you want to look at, talk about?
Describe how they look again. Like the height. How tall are they to be standing?
Whereas Marco Polo or Ctesias didn't give a true height, the best explanation came from Ctesias in his writings, where he said that they understood each other. Their teeth are larger than those of dogs, as well as their nails, and they have a very swarthy complexion. So, and he described them as being just.
Right.
Intriguing.
Do they have any, like, mention any like aggressive traits to them other than communicating with each other? Because it dates back to the Greek.
Yeah, as with the Greeks, what he says was they openly traded with the Indians, and only by using barking and making signs with their hands. But as Marco Polo mentions, that they're very cruel and will eat anybody or everybody that they can catch if that's not of their own race.
So they can be friendly in a way to trade.
In some retrospects, yes, but
Yeah.
that's a story from a very long time ago.
Right.
And I think this was actually the kicker with the story for Ctesias was that it was secondhand knowledge. He did not see the Dogman or the Cynocephali in person, but it came from his dealings with Indians through the trade route and his station.
Right.
So,
You got any questions, Delph?
No, you pretty much covered what I was, honestly, what I was just thinking about.
Yeah.
like I said, that's where if I were to come down onto it, I would think that the cynocephalus or the cynocephali would describe some of the sightings that we're seeing nowadays, that it may have been a tribe of people that just had the dog-shaped heads.
Right.
And they're...
Or like it could just be like a headdress for like a tribe of people.
That's very possible as well. So, I mean, but this right here, I mean, it just... Where they have some accounts where we can date back. There is no origin. And at this time, though, with Ctesias, he would have known the difference between, like, lycanthropes, which we think of as werewolves.
Right.
Because the story of, I'm trying to remember, King Lycan, who tested Zeus, well, it predated this, so he would know the difference between lycanthrope and the cynocephali. Right. So, and he doesn't describe them as a lycanthrope at all.
Right.
Would you guys want me to go on and tell an encounter, or do you guys want to step in?
Tell a story with it, like a story that you found that you think could give like probable cause or somewhat more truth.
Let's see. The one I found, I actually found it on unexplainedmysteries.com. It was submitted by Alexandria HHM, and this dates from July 1988. In her post, I'm going to just read it to you guys. It says, I went to visit my father for the summer in Middlesex County, Virginia. The first couple of nights was there. My dad was very paranoid about letting me go outside after dark. When I finally got him to tell me why, he said that there had been some kind of creature that had been killing deer in the area. Fish and Wildlife had been unable to identify what it was. He didn't go into detail about it, but he wanted me to stay indoors after dark. About a week later, my dad's dog, a 150-pound lab mix, started to whimper in the yard. Dad went outside with a shotgun and screamed at me when I tried to follow. After a few moments, I heard a gunshot. Then my dad returned to the house. He told me he had shot the creature. The next morning, we went out into the woods and searched for the body. We found spots of blood in the area where the creature had been shot, but after searching for a couple of hours, we did not find the body. Things were quiet after that for about 2 weeks, and then one night I heard something land on the heat pump underneath my bedroom window. I thought it might have been one of the cats that had a tendency to jump from the roof. It goes on, there's a side note that says, before you ask about cats jumping off of a roof, my dad lived in a small trailer. It wasn't a long fall. I sat up in bed and pulled back the curtain to check it out, and came face to face with what I believed to be a werewolf. Its front paws were on the heat pump, and its muzzle was up against the window screen. It was covered with dark hair, with a very long wolf-like muzzle. Its mouth was pulled back in a snarl. From what I could tell, there was no fur on the muzzle itself. It was leathery and wrinkled. Its teeth were long and white, and its breath was hot and smelled like rotten meat. Its shoulders took up the width of the window. I stared at it, frozen with fright. I couldn't move or scream. I could only stare into its face, with only the screen window separating us. Its eyes were black and soulless, like a doll's eyes. The sound it made was like a deep pant. After what seemed like an eternity, it left. It jumped down from the heat pump, and I watched it disappear back into the woods. I ran to wake up my dad, but by the time he went outside, it was gone. After that, we heard the beast several times, but I did not see it again until a few days before I was going home. I was home alone. Dad had went to get pizza when I heard something outside again. This time, it was in the front of the house. I looked out the window and the front door and watched it walk across the yard and across the street. It walked on two legs like a man, but its legs were inverted like an animal. To this day, my dad won't go into the woods at night without a shotgun. He doesn't like to talk about what he's seen. I guess he doesn't want anyone to think he's crazy. Myself, I haven't had any other experiences there or anywhere else for that matter. I don't know why the wolf didn't try to attack when I met it face to face. I don't understand why it just left the way it did. I once heard a theory that it was a Native American shapeshifter sent for a purpose, and I wasn't that purpose. But the only shapeshifter stories I've heard relating to Native Americans are from the Navajo. In the area I was at, we have only the Mataponia and the Pamunkey tribes. Sorry if I misspelled those. Like I have said, I believe I saw a werewolf, but I never saw it transform into a human, so I cannot be sure what it is. All I know is that it looked like a very large wolf that walked on two legs. Gray wolves that once were native to the area have been extinct there, as well as the rest of eastern America for a century. That is my story. Like I said, I would appreciate any feedback or theories about what it was I saw outside my bedroom window. Like I said, again, that story came from Alexandria HHM on unexplainedmysteries.com.
Right. So there was some interesting points to that story. My questions are, we're talking about Dogman and everything, and there's a great likeness between Dogman and, your werewolves. Now, could you explain to people what the difference would be between a werewolf and a Dogman, other than appearances?
Well, usually what we see, from what I've found when I was researching it, whenever somebody really talks about like werewolves, it's the human transformation into a werewolf.
Right.
So there could be there could be similarities where like the Dogman and the werewolf could share similar body features. Whereas, because the werewolf is going to take the form of a human, so it would probably, from everything you see in the movies and everything that you read, it should take the stature of the same human.
So around the same height.
Yeah, there might be a little elongation of the bones and just a broadening of the stature.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see depictions of werewolves and stuff like that, they're all like, they're like plantigrade. Like, they walk like a human.
Right.
What this is describing as, it was digitigrade, like a wolf, but only walking.
Inverted legs.
Yeah, where it's what it is it looks inverted to us, but what actually happens is the way we're looking at a dog's leg or a cat or anything that's digitigrade is the foot itself is elongated.
Right.
right? So that's not so where it looks like it's got another bend back. It's just where it walks on its toe pads,
Right.
and its foot is elongated up, and then its knee is actually closer to its stomach.
Right.
So that's where we see the difference. And like I said, a lot of the cases where they talk about it is okay. So the werewolves, and I believe you had stuff on the different types of dogmen.
I do.
Where one of them is more hominid, like it.
It's more humanoid.
Yeah.
You could say. Yeah.
And
Yes.
but where this is, it was literally describing. Okay, this was digitigrade. It did have hands instead of paws.
Right. Had
And-
dog-like feet and human hands.
Yes. So, is it a perfect example? No. But how we can go and look at it from my perspective is, hey, we're trying, like when we look at this stuff, when we started looking at everything, we don't care how weird it looks or how weird it sounds. When all of the information kind of correlates across this story and this story and this story all the way down, and there's factors that you have to look at, and they're all similarities, that's a good thing. Where maybe this isn't so far-fetched because it's kind of looking like the details that they're given match up with similarly with details of other things.
Right.
And like I said, this was from 1988, and yeah, there was horror movies out with werewolves and everything like that. They've been around forever.
Yeah. But these also were. They've been around for centuries. For long times, there have been always descriptions of, dogmen and, werewolves for lycanthropy or, whatever.
Right.
So it's like, it's nothing new. Nothing that has been brought to minds of, the last century or so. Like, this has been a thing that's been going on for a long time. That's still a mystery to us.
Right. Like he mentioned, dating back to ancient Greek.
Oh, yeah.
So it's years and years of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's not just like, a random, ooh, this is new, this is a cool thing to like try to get people to think it's, happening or it's real. But this is like stuff that has been continually.
It's been continuous through,
Centuries, right?
at least, 2,600 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Got to add like a form of validation to it as well. So
that's, and you got to think it was a different time period as well. So this, like I said, it was the late 80s. So unless you're going to a library and you're specifically looking for this one item and hoping to God that somebody had it because you weren't looking on the internet,
Right.
So you had to either hear news stories, look up books in the library,
Right.
translate books from Greek
Original.
and it wasn't readily available as it is now.
Right. There's a lot greater effort to be put into it.
Yeah, and we live in a time now where it's like, okay, well, we can actually sit here and we can compile everything that we want to look at and be, okay, where do these stories kind of have a variance and where do they share similarities?
Right.
And a lot of them, I mean, there's been a lot of great work done. Like I said, we've got some information from the North American Dogman Project. Dogman
Fascinating pictures.
Say again?
stuff. It's like incriminating pictures
Yeah,
that
very.
really makes me truly want to believe that it's a real
Excuse
thing.
me. Sorry.
It makes you question things.
Um, like their Dogman Encounters radio. That was.
Yes.
They've had a lot of great, programs and stories being told on that. Um, where we found most of our stuff to do our investigation was from the Cloaked Hedgehog, and where I found a lot of the information dating back for the history of the Dogman encounters and stuff like that was from godsandmonsters.com.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to give credit to those people. They've done an excellent job. So, but which one of you fine gentlemen would like to go next?
Delph, would you like to,
Well,
or I can?
if you don't mind, we actually starting near Chattanooga, Tennessee. Unfortunately, we don't have a date for this event. It's in Hamilton County.
Hamilton County.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Hamilton County.
Now, can you tell us the story that goes along with the sighting?
Absolutely. And that's for the sources, dogmanencounters.com/Hamilton County, Tennessee /.
Right, and for like
I
all
got-
the stuff we can put down in description.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
Yeah.
I got to the top of the hill and slammed on my brakes because as soon as I got to the top of the hill, this huge black hairy thing came bounding across the road. It was so big when it ran, back arched up, kind of like a cheetah, but a lot more than that. I know that if it would have been stood up, it would have been well over 6 feet tall, maybe taller. Also, I know another car saw it too because it hit the brakes as well. We both just stared for minutes, just standing in the road, not believing what we had just seen. I truly have no idea what it was I saw. It was not a dog or a horse. Dogs do not get that big, arch their backs, or anything that this creature was doing. The arms, legs, whatever it had were so long it was having to throw them to the side just to run. And the appendages, it were just as big as well. It ran from one side of the woods to another non-stop, like it was either going after something or run. And that is the end of our encounter, ladies and gentlemen.
Interesting. So there's a lot to that story that makes you question about things. Now, I
Indeed.
lost my question as I started talking.
as it happened.
Yeah. Well, Dark, you got anything about it?
Can you read like the last little bit again? Because I think it broke up just a little bit. It was right after it was running from something or towards something. I didn't catch the last bit.
All right. It ran from one side of the woods to the other, either going after something or running away from something.
Okay. And so they said this was like a long, gangly beast, right?
Yeah.
So
They talk as if it was in full sprint, as if it was in full pursuit or in full intention of getting away from something.
Right.
Which begs the question for me, if it is the latter, what thing is scary looking to two people, one who is recounting this story, the other person that happened to be involved in the incident,
Right.
are both mesmerized and in shock from this because they're both in the middle of the road. This thing is running. And if it is the latter, what is spooking it? And it is like, just like horror.
yeah, that's kind of weird. What is actually scaring the beast, if that's
Yes.
the case.
Yes. And exactly. Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Now, would you describe like
What
a-
the fuck is that? Like, if you're a big bad, like that like begs the question. It's after something. Is it hunting? Is this its travel speed like certain animals have? Cheetahs can go up to like 50, 60 miles per hour. And that's when they're hunting, I think.
70, which is
The 70s. Yeah. Like, it is. And so, it just begs so many questions. So many questions.
It's like reminds me of a story I read. Me and Dark talked about this one a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't my story, but it just reminds me of this one. It happened. What was it? Zimbabwe.
I believe so.
Oh, yes.
Zimbabwe. But basically, the story is this man and his son had a flat tire on the side of the road in Zimbabwe. And it was dark out, so they had their flashlights, fixing the car, but they could see something big, ferocious, tall, 9 feet tall, out in the field. And as they're fixing the wheel, he's telling his son, hurry up, put the wheel back on. Eventually they finish the task, jump back in the car, and once they do, he said they took off on the car, flooring it, while this beast is running next to the car, full speed. Now, a car having its foot all the way to the ground, going at least 60, 70, 80 miles an hour.
Full speed.
Full speed. Having this creature run next to it, that just makes you wonder, like, is it casually running next to it, like its travel speed, or is that its full speed?
Yeah, true. I mean, we looked at quite a few of them that were the people were driving, and the creature was able to keep pace,
right,
very easily. I'm trying to remember. Was it the one out of the Hurricane Katrina one?
That one. She was parked because
that's right. She had hit one of the construction pylons.
Yeah, and knocked her mirror off. Stupid retriever.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
that's another great story.
It was another great story. Was that one was on Darkness or Dogman Encounters as well, right? Dogman Encounters Radio.
Yeah, I think that was. If you look at, they have an episode that's 9 hours long. I want to say it's the second or third story.
Yeah, is it the one that's right before the story that you're going to present?
I think so. Yeah.
Or it's very close to that one.
It's pretty close. I'd say mine's a couple stories behind it, because that was one of the, like I said, one of the first ones was the Katrina one.
But I know we had looked at where the cloaked hedgehog she's actually got a encounters map of encounters all over the world. That's where we found the Zimbabwe encounter. We'd found a few other encounters, but I know that was another thing where they talked about just the speed at which the creature was able to keep up with them.
Yeah, and it's just it's mind-boggling, really, to think there's something out there that can run alongside your vehicle.
Right.
Probably not a race car, but just your common vehicle going as fast as it can. Something that can keep up with that is just truly terrifying.
Yeah, it's not something that you would want to run into on barefoot, so to speak, because you're not outrunning it.
No.
But there was also encounters that I'd seen where the creature itself was not. It was. They described the speed at which it moved, but just the sheer athleticism of the creature. There was one encounter, I believe it was on Dark Waters on YouTube. If you can look it up. I can't remember the exact episode, but I know I believe he was doing a show at the time. It was a radio show. This was a few years ago. And this is what really got me with like the Dogman and different types of cryptids was it was a truck driver was getting off the interstate, and it had a breakdown lane, you know, where or not so much like a breakdown lane, but like a braking lane for like a mountainside.
Right.
And
like a rest stop kind of area.
Well, not necessarily a rest stop.
You're talking about like the place where like if your brakes fail, you can
that right there, where it's where you can truckers will pull off and it'll slow the truck down.
Yeah, it's like an emergency stop for trucks.
Yeah.
Going down hills when their brakes fail. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But apparently, he was the way that this one was set up was you had the emergency braking lane. And then after that was I want to say it was the exit ramp. So you could see everything because the breakdown lane was lit. And he said that he had seen a creature because he had, let me back myself up. So, you know how if you're driving down the road, you might see like truckers will be parked on the shoulder of like an on ramp or an off ramp,
right?
And that sometimes they're doing whatever truckers do.
Yeah.
But I believe this gentleman, he had pulled off because he was switching something out of his cab, so he just needed to pull off for just a second. And he said that when he pulled over, there was the breakdown lane and then a wood line. Well, as soon as he pulled over, stopped his truck, he got out, he walked around, I think to the passenger side, and he looked behind him because he heard rustling in the wood line, and he saw this creature literally clear that whole breakdown lane in one jump, and then
imagine these breakdown lanes are pretty wide.
Yeah,
they're stopping 16-wheeler semi trucks carrying massive loads down the mountains. So you're looking at 15, 20 feet wide minimum.
Oh yeah, it's a semi truck. I mean, I think they give way to like maybe 5-6 foot of extra space on each side. So if you were to park a semi truck right down the middle of it, you'd have that extra 10 foot of space.
Yeah.
And this thing came out of the wood line, cleared it, and went up the on-ramp. And the guy said that I got back in my truck and pulled the hell out of there.
As one should.
As one should do.
As one does.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't sit there to stick around to see what it was going to do.
I know, right? I mean, that's just suicide.
Yeah.
Because this thing just literally came out of the wood line and just jumped over and then sprinted up the hill.
Right.
Like it was no biggie.
Now, everyone talking about these past stories, the sheer speed of them. So you got to imagine what legs it would have on it, but to also clear 15 feet distance in a single jump.
Yeah.
Full sprint up a highway. Like I give props to the guy. I'd have been in shock. I probably wouldn't have moved.
Yeah, well, there might have been some things he left out about something in his pants.
Yeah.
But I can go, dude. You deserve that one. You're fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll. What's up, Duke? Good to see you, my man. But anyways, I guess we'll jump into the story I have now. Mine actually also comes from the Dogman Encounters YouTube. Now, we were talking about the Hurricane Trinity one. This story is from the same video. It's quite lengthy, so bear with me. I shortened some parts and added a elongated some to give more detail. But anyways, the encounter, it actually happened in Metairie, Louisiana. To start, the main story that I'm talking about had just finished high school, was helping his mom move from Nebraska to Louisiana. He was only supposed to stay a week just to help her unpack. In return for helping her, she would give him a tour of the city because in Nebraska, there wasn't any big cities that he was around. They made the agreement, and in his mind, he thought he was getting back on his bus to go to Nebraska that Friday because his week was up. Anyways, she ended up showing him a bunch of tourist attractions and then asked if he wanted to go to the French Quarters in New Orleans. After walking around for 30 minutes, seeing people drinking, having a good time, he decided he didn't want to go back to Nebraska, but to stay there in Louisiana. His I lost my spot. So his mother agreed, but ended up. His mother agreed, but she said he had to apply to go to school or get a job. He ended up doing both, and he actually got accepted into college, but it was summer and classes didn't start till. He got a job at a clothing store. He then started to say that after he had been working there for about 7 to 8 days, a pretty young woman came in, and he actually ended up doing some light flirting, he stated. Then asked if he could take her out on a date because he was in a new state and didn't know anyone. Anyways, the girl agrees and that she would meet him there at a park in Metairie on Friday. According to our guy, Metairie is about 12-15 miles up the road. Friday rolls around and he gets some directions from his boss, gets off work, and starts heading that way. He pulls up to the park where they're supposed to meet, parks his car, gets out, and heads over to sit on a park bench to wait just a little before 7. Started waiting, and after about 5 minutes, a guy walks up to him and asks if he wanted to play some basketball. He said he couldn't because he's obviously waiting to meet somebody. And they started talking. That guy introduced himself as Herman and and our guy actually mentioned that his name is Stubbs. Now these are street names they had for each other. So I don't really know the guy's name, but he went by Stubbs. As they're talking, the others came up and asked if he wanted to play, and he told them no, he's waiting. Anyways, 15 minutes go by, and his date still hasn't showed up. Then another 15 minutes, and another 15 minutes come and go. At this point, he believes he was stood up. About 8 o'clock rolls around, and the guys come back and ask if he wants to play, and he decides why not, because he's obviously stood up at this point. They end up playing until the street lights turn on and went back off, and so it was too dark to see. As they finished playing, some of the guys started talking about how they wanted to get some beer, and our guy Stubbs decided a nice cold beer would be good. He asked them where the nearest liquor store was, and they told him, they're about to go, and he could just come with them. They left in the park and started walking across the street onto some railroad tracks. Once they were up on the tracks, the sides started to fall away, and at this point they're elevated about 4 to 5 feet off the ground. He said on the left of him were 3 buildings. One is a salvage yard, one is a tire shop, and the other is a lumber yard. There's a street light behind each of the buildings, but the way they are spaced out, there are areas between each light that is pure black. Anyways, they're walking along, and Herman and Stubbs were talking because Herman is about to have a baby, actually, and was asking if Stubbs had any advice for him. That's besides the point. They started off walking again, and he said to the right of them is a field of thistles that run about 125 to 150 yards long. Thistles had grown to about 7 feet tall, so it was a long, thick field full of grown thistles. He also mentioned, since that they were standing on top of the tracks, they could kind of see the tops of all the weeds. He then turns to look into the field. As he turns to look into the field, and he's turning back to look at Herman. He thinks he's seen something in his peripheral vision. So he jerked his head back to the field, and Herman asked, "What are you looking at?" Stubbs told him that he thought he seen something move, and Herman said that it might be the dog from the junkyard. He said that the dog is mean, but if you throw rocks at it, it'll run off and leave us alone. So they keep walking and finally exit from the first street light. Now you gotta remember, the street lights are spaced so far apart that it's complete darkness until you reach the next one. So they exit from the first street light, and they're now in the gloom, the pure darkness, till they reach the next light. Stubbs said he kept looking to the field to see if the dog was going to come after us. And right as that time he looked over, something big jumped out of the thistle patch onto the tracks. And as their first instinct is, run. So they start running to the next street light. But before they get to the next light, Herman tripped and fell. He didn't make it to the light, so he was in pitch dark. Herman yelled out to them, "Don't leave me." And our guy Stubbs was like, "Well, if it's the Rottweiler from the junkyard, I'll just grab some rocks, run over to Herman, scare the dog away, and we'll be able to escape." So Stubbs scoops up 2 handfuls of rocks, runs back to Herman about 5 to 6 steps to get close enough to throw the rocks. Some of the other guys had stopped to turn back to help as well. But anyways, Herman had fell, and he was turned on his back trying to scramble backwards to the light, because he had not made it to the street light yet, and he was still in the darkness. But he was close enough for Stubbs to be able to see him. Turned out Herman stopped yelling, and that's when Stubbs seen this thing sitting over top of him, looking Herman in his eyes. He stopped and finally seen it. He could see the silhouette. It was squatting over top of him. Herman was on his elbows, but this thing was only 5 to 6 inches away from Herman's face, looking him in the eyes. It wasn't growling, it wasn't snarling, it wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there, looking over him in his face. Herman isn't moving. He seems petrified with fear. That's when I yelled, "Get it out of here," for the final time. And that's when the thing looked up at me and the other guys surveying us like I had just seen us for the first time. It snapped back down looking at Herman, and it's like its full focus was on him. And that's when I finally got a good look at this thing and noticed how big it really was compared to the biggest dog Stubbs has ever seen. He said, "I've never seen anything that big before. I really started to notice the true width and girth of this thing, and I'm thinking that this isn't a dog or anything. It's something else." During all this, everyone behind Stubbs are still yelling, and he says I guess he couldn't see him because he was standing in the way. The thing is still ignoring them, and Stubbs is thinking he should have kept running, but since he didn't, he's wondering where should he go. He then said, "I'd moved just a little, and when I did, the thing stopped looking at Herman and looked right at me, and that's when I seen its eyes really good, and they were dead yellow." He said the color was like a dark yellow color, looked dead inside. He then described that the eyes looked bigger than a golf ball and spaced about 7 inches apart. He said, "I know there isn't a dog that's eyes are spaced that far apart." It didn't blink, it just looked dead at me. And when it did, I locked up, and at this point, I couldn't hear the other guys yelling behind me because my heart was beating so loud it was drowning them out. He then said that I'm looking at this thing and I'm trying to run. Instead of running, I just urinated on myself, he mentioned. So you gotta imagine like what kind of fear is running through him looking at this, for him to be completely frozen to, piss himself.
Yeah, just losing, control of bodily functions.
Yep.
Right.
Anyways, he said he completely stopped and it looked back. He said, "Yeah, I completely stopped because it had had a look on its face that basically said, 'I dare you to try and run. I dare you.'" A facial expression coming from this monster. He could clearly read what it was thinking. Anyways, and that's when the other guys behind him finally seen it, because where Stubbs had moved that one step, they were able to see past him. And that's when they started saying, "What is that? What is that?" They weren't saying Herman's name anymore. And Stubbs then mentioned that he's probably less than 10 feet away. So he had a good look at it, even though it was still in the shadows. He said, "I could still see it. I'm looking at this thing. My body is frozen, and I'm thinking I'm going to die." The chest on this thing is probably 42 to 45 inches wide. So you gotta imagine it's wider than your average window, easily.
Very
This thing's
true.
really, really wide.
Right.
Anyways, as time crept by, he said the thing started to focus on Herman again. One of the guys was wearing a fanny pack and pulled out a 38 special and pointed it at this thing. And when he did, someone yelled, "Don't shoot it." He also then mentioned that he guesses that this thing noticed, and when it did look up at him with those, it looked up at them with a whole new figure. He took another survey of each and every one of them individually, and that's when it focused in on the guy with the gun. He said then it took 2 steps closer to them, more into the light. He said at this point its head and shoulders had finally appeared completely into the light. He said, and that's when he saw the muzzle, its ears, and how big its head actually was. He said its mouth was definitely broad and kind of long, but not too long. He said it was long enough to get the job done, and that's when the creature laid its ears back and smiled like a dog does, showing its teeth. He said the teeth had to be at least 3 inches long. The canines were definitely 3 inches long, he said. He said it also had other teeth, not like molars, but cutting teeth, sharp for cutting meat. He said it then growled. It wasn't loud, it was low, but he could feel it in his body, and at that time it seemed like it was growling, and didn't want to grow attention to it, other than the 7 guys that were there already. But regardless, he said that the low growl got his message across, and that's when someone took off running. Stubbs said he don't know who ran, because he was too afraid to take his eyes off the creature. And he mentioned next that the creature put its hand, yes hand, not paw, but its hand in front of Herman. He described his fingers had to be 10 to 11 inches long and tipped off with 2 to 3 inch claws that were slightly curved. The first thing that came to his mind when looking at he said a werewolf. So I'm looking at a werewolf. He said this should only be on TV, in movies, or fairy tales. This can't be real. And he's thinking, well, I'm about to die. He then described the forearms were as big as his thighs. The muscle was bunched up because of the weight it had on it. Now, think about this. Its forearms were the size of his thighs. Not his arms, but his forearms. So, this creature's massive. He then mentioned that he didn't see any body fat, but he did see the fur, and the fur seemed about 2 inches long. It didn't look ratty or unkempt. It looked pretty well groomed. He said he didn't see leaves or grass in its coat. It looked smooth. He then described the biceps looked a lot like Brock Lesnar's shoulders and biceps, but 3 times the size. Now, some of you may know who that is, some may not, but let's just say he's a MMA fighter, wrestler who is insanely big.
He's a pretty big boy.
He's a big boy, but imagine his size times 3.
Yeah, it's ungodly.
Yeah. Anyways, he said it looked so unnatural being down. It said, not unnatural. He said that it looked natural being down on all 4s. Like that's how it would normally move. Now, here's the interesting thing he said. For you pet owners who have seen a dog twitch like it's going to bite on itself for fleas, you know, the quick jerking movement? Well, he said this thing twitched and it moved with that kind of speed. It didn't move to its haunches or tail or to Herman, but when it twitched, it looked right really fast into the thistle field, and it stood up on 2 legs. He said, and I'm looking at it, and it's just going up and up and up. And he's like, oh my god, this thing has to be 9 feet tall. Now, just imagine that. You're looking at a dog standing 9 feet tall. But it's not a dog because it has human arms with dog legs. And he also mentioned that he's played basketball all his life, so he knows how tall 9 feet is. So 9 feet is probably a pretty good estimate. This thing could have dunked the basketball standing up, he said, and that's when he seen more of the body. It had a flat stomach, but because of the fur, he couldn't tell if it had abs or not. But with how muscular this thing is, I'm sure there were abs. It also had gray highlights in it, like a patchwork quilt. There were no defining patterns. He said it looked right, and I'm looking at its hind legs, and it had haunches like a dog. So that would be your the one you mentioned earlier.
Digitigrade?
Digitigrade, that's the one. So it's not flat-footed; it's digitigrade. To us, inverted, you would say.
Yeah.
Anyways, he said the feet were huge, but they were still dog feet. And then he says he remembers hearing it breathe, and it sounds like a deep huff. He said, then at this time my mind snapped. He said my life was different from this counter. But this thing also had 4 breasts on it. So maybe he's saying it could have been a female, I'm assuming.
That's highly possible. Sorry.
Yeah, he said he didn't look down. He didn't look anymore like towards genitals or anything because he was more focused on what it was looking at. He said, and then he looked left into the thistles, and that's when he seen 6 red lights, or about 60 to 70 feet away, down in the thick stuff. Not over top of the thistles, but down inside of it. And that's when the werewolf, Dogman, jumped off the tracks and back into the thistles. And it was running through this stuff, and it just looked like a wave moving through it. And that's when they ended up running up to Herman and checking out Herman, see if he's okay. But here's where it gets interesting. Herman looks completely gone, like his soul has left his body. He has no senses. He wouldn't move, and he wouldn't respond to anybody. He even mentioned that he even had a little drool running out of his mouth, because I guess he was in shock.
Yeah.
They ended up grabbing him, and they ran. And they ran to the liquor store, which was not much farther from where they were. They're sitting there outside when one of the other guys notices something in Herman's hair. They try to brush it out because, maybe it's just like a little fuzz or something. And they're trying to brush it out, but it won't come out. That's when Stubbs goes over, and he wets his hand, try to knock it out as well. And he noticed that Herman's hair had actually turned white. A patch of his head had actually turned white. That's what gets me the most about this story is you have somebody being so scared, petrified, literally, that it affected the way their body reacted. Could you imagine being so scared that your hair literally turned a whole different color?
That's like losing. It's weird. It's just that sheer panic, shock, and everything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, he also went to mention that he knew that Herman's hair wasn't like that before because, they'd obviously been talking while playing basketball together, and he could obviously see what was in his hair the whole time they were playing.
Very true.
So, where did the white spot come from? This dude was literally been so much in shock, it turned his hair white. That's what baffles me the most about this story. But that's basically the end of it. He then goes on to talk about more stuff and how it affected him later on. But for the encounter, that's it.
Yeah. So when you look back at the story, they make good comparisons to say that it doesn't stand like if you were to look at a dog standing up, right?
Right.
Say if you taught a dog or a wolf or anything to stand on its hind legs, it's still going to be like they don't have that narrowing of the body from like the shoulders to the hind legs. I mean, they have a little bit,
right?
But it in the description, it's like its girth just seemed way too big to actually be like any kind of canine just standing on its hind legs.
Right.
But also the fact that it does mention in great detail the hands and not paws that these creatures have.
Right.
I mean,
Right. Right, and what gets me the most about it is, I know I left out a little detail about the hands, but to go into more detail, he also said that the claws on it, 2 to 3 inches, slightly curved, but they're not hooked. They're curved enough to where it can put its hands on the ground flat and its fingers not be arched off because of the claws. So they're
Yeah.
curved enough for the hand to comfortably lay flat on the ground. They're still 3-inch long claws.
And that dates back. And there were similar accounts, like, hold on, let me go back and look at my notes real quick. Head like dogs, teeth and eyes likewise. Actually, where the account from the Greek physician Ctesias, where he was talking about that the teeth are larger than those of dogs. Their nails like those of these animals, but longer and rounder. So, I mean, we can take that either way of how it would, be it curved or if it just rounded off, like, when you take a dog and have their nails clipped, they round it off.
Right.
So I'm not sure if they have, the meaning behind it, but it does play in a part where it describes where the being or the creature has the similar traits, but like some traits are, what's a good word for it? Exaggerated.
Right,
like embellishments and whatnot.
Yeah, like the size of their teeth, the length of claws, the way it's done.
Right.
See, like, what also you mentioned that, like, exaggerated. The only thing I feel that would be truly exaggerated from the story is the length of the fingers.
Well, see, I'm not saying like it was exaggerated, like it was an exaggerated part of the story, but I was just saying, just exaggerated that they were longer or bigger than a normal canine.
Right. Like, I understand what you're saying, but like, what I'm just saying, like, if you're asking me like what I feel could be like off about the story, I would mention the fingers, because I wouldn't imagine something having a foot long finger.
See, yeah, that might seem like a little bit too long, but that could be.
Right.
He could be going with including the palm.
Oh, well, that is fair. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
From knuckle to
from like wrist to fingertip, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he said it didn't have any problem, like it, being on all fours.
Yeah, it looked like it was in its natural state, how it would just normally move.
But I also wonder if the similar to in like ancient Peru, where they would bind their children's heads to honor their gods.
Oh yeah, that's.
What if this is like a form of alteration to the body,
right, like
to make these claws grow this way? They're doing like a certain activity.
Yeah, like a stretching or something.
Yeah, they're
kind
doing
of like
something.
the giraffe neck lady, you could say.
Yes.
Where's the necklace?
Some African. Yeah.
Look at you boys alluding to future episodes.
But 100%. So who's to know? Who's to say?
Well, like another thing that struck me in your story, in the retelling of the story, was the guttural growl, where they could feel it, like
he felt it in his chest.
He could feel the reverb from the growl.
Which is crazy, also, because he said it didn't growl loud at all. Like, it was a hushed growl, but it was so deep and guttural that he felt it in his chest.
Right. Well, that's the.
Say again. We lost you there for a second.
Oh, apologies. Well, that's just you feel bass in your chest, right?
Right.
So if you hear a bass note or something that is real bassy, like you'll feel it.
Right.
So if this is a creature that is bassy, guttural, kind of thing, that is going in anyone. I don't care who.
Yeah, very
Exactly.
very true. I mean, but you look at like how far like science has come,
Right.
and there's been studies where like the Tyrannosaurus Rex may not have roared like everybody thinks it would have roared, but it would be a reverberation of the sound around it, and you would feel the bass from it, but it wouldn't be very loud.
Right.
But that also comes in, and you look back toward like other cryptid sightings. Like let's look at like Bigfoot sightings, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
There's similar recounts of that feeling of like a guttural roar, and you just feel the reverb from the sheer size of the creature.
Right.
Right. It's like, say you're standing next to a big bass drum. You're standing next to it, and somebody hits it. You're going to feel that thump, that deep reverb inside the drum, inside of you. That's how I imagine him feeling, having the growl. He also mentioned he was 10 feet max away, less than 10 feet.
Yeah, so you definitely feel it. If so, do you want to bring up some of the pictures that we had found online?
Yeah. Let me. I'm going to show the two types of dogmen.
Okay, go ahead.
And it also gives a little description. There's two types, and I got these from dogmanencounters.com. Anyways, basically, I'm just going to pull it over since I'm streaming it.
Okay.
There are two types. The type we're talking about is the K9 type. That's your more dog characteristics with the word I can never remember. The dark says legs.
Digitigrade.
Digitigrade, which they go back and then up, and with the knee more towards the torso. That's the whole foot, but they stand on the pads of the feet. That's the whole type we're talking about. But there are reports of the other type, which is the type 3, which we talked about earlier, the more human-like features. Now, if you look, this thing just looks like a giant, stacked, beefy man with a dog head. That's kind of how they mentioned the stuff from Dark Stuff.
Yeah, the cynocephali.
The cynocephali, yeah. Now, that's how you would picture those. And it just, in my opinion, if I were to run into any of them, I would rather run into the canine type. Because for some odd reason, the type 3 definitely spooks me, just to look at it. They also say the type 9 is more of your iconic werewolf look, Can't really say I've seen any of the type 3s in any movies or documentaries other than here.
Yeah.
Right.
Here we go. It actually mentions it. Type 3 is certain anatomical features that let us know they can't be apes, like Sasquatch. Apes, fingernails, toenails. Type 3 dogmen have claws and fingertips. So basically, you Sasquatch without the paws, but claws instead.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy. But that's our two types that we know of, or have accounts of, you could say.
I think if you actually go on to where the 9 types are, there's an actual video on YouTube that kind of goes into the detail of like the 9 types that they suspect are like dogmen.
Right.
I do not remember it off the top of my head, but you can look at that and see the different types that people believe could represent the actual creature.
Right.
So what I'll do is let me bring up this real quick, somehow maybe, because it's not giving me the option now. Give me just 1 second. Let me fix this. There we go. Screen. Why is it not giving me that? So what we have, and this is the footprint in the sand, well, the sand clay that we looked at earlier. Give me just 1 second, maybe. Boop. There we go. Put this back on top so we don't lose videos. We did find all the pictures that I have right here are from the North American Dogman project. And so we can see where it's not walking flat-footed.
Right. It's got the more the
It's
digitigrade.
yeah, it's more on the pads of its feet, and you can see how long, the actual claws the claws as you see them dig into the sand,
Right.
and then just the sheer length of the fore part of the foot. So that's, I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You look at that, you can kind of tell the claws there, probably 2 inches, inch to 2.5, I would say.
Yeah, very close. What is it?
Still extremely large claws for an animal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to see if I can move this next picture in without it messing up. Probably not. Go ahead and bring this down again. Let's bring this picture up. And here we have another one, and it was measured in the snow. So, where we have a little bit of, I would say there's probably some melting of the snow to make it appear bigger than what it actually is.
You don't have that picture up.
I don't have it. Give me just 1 second. I'm sorry. Change windows. Photos.
There you go.
All right. So it's popping up where I'm recording and not popping up into this. So,
Right.
but yeah, from what it looks like to me
Jesus.
is there's, how you step in snow and it'll kind of melt and form a little bit
Spread out.
more. I think that's what happened with this picture. So it may be the size of the hand, or just maybe a couple inches bigger.
Right. Where the snow's like caved in, and plus the heat from the foot.
Yeah,
actually
just
melting a bit of the snow. Yeah.
Who knows? That print could be from the night before. You can clearly tell it's daytime with the picture. So,
Yeah.
heat from the sun and stuff could melt it a little bit.
Yeah, very true. So, like I said, these are just some of the things we're seeing. Change over to the other one. Oop, that's a wrong button. Come on. Screen, change window. Now this one, this is the one that you were having problems with.
Yeah, I cannot wrap my mind around this picture.
Whoa.
Like, I will admit, there's parts of this that make it look extremely fake, but when you go into detail around it, like in the shadows.
And I have the negative exposure picture as well. I'll put that up next. But I just want everybody just to get a good look at this one. Try to keep this pictured, and then when I switch over to the negative, all the details pretty much line up.
They stay the same, no alteration. Like if a picture's been altered, you can tell. Because, they'll miss details, but if you look, the shadow, it's arched, it's turned, its hand sticking out. Assume it's its right hand.
Yeah, it's looking back toward the camera.
Yeah, but here's one I want to put out as well. Its feet. See how the front part of half of its feet's the only thing touching? That's where its pads are.
Yeah.
And its claws, you could say, from the other pictures, instead of its whole foot. Now, if its whole foot stepped, you'd probably get a whole nother 4-5 inches out of that. But as we said before, and people have mentioned, only the paws of the foot touch, because that's what makes contact.
Yeah, the front pads.
Right.
All right, let me go and pull up the negative now. Open up the negative. Did I lock? I did lock it back down. I've got to get used to locking and unlocking. I'm sorry for the delay.
Another thing that blows my mind
It's
about
fine.
it is its head. There we go. The negative.
So as where we were looking at everything inside the negative, it matches completely.
It still lines up. There's no alterations. And it's just, man. And then its head. The head gets me the most. The head and the shoulder. That's what blows my mind the most from this picture. It's like, I don't know. You're definitely looking at something out of this world.
Yeah, it's creepy, but not like too creepy. If that's a way to describe it. Like, you definitely don't want to run into it in the middle of the night.
No.
But it really doesn't seem dissimilar to like a German Shepherd or a wolf.
Yeah. Right. And like the way people like all the encounters and stuff that you'll describe it, that's basically how it's described. Massive forearms. It's really long fingers. Look at that. Oh.
Sorry. I thought you were done with it, and
You're fine. But anyways, like, you can match them up, and the fingers are like long fingers, the massive build, its shoulders twice as wide as its lower half body, and it's long. I done forgot the word. Digitigrade feet, man. It's like stuff blows my mind. Is like, it's hard to picture it being real, but with so much like reports and stories, the way people describe it, it's hard to imagine it not being real.
yeah, that's like I said, and where we had looked at so many different sightings before we just settled down on the 3 that we chose to tell. They all all very similar. They all correlate.
Yeah, they all match each other.
Yeah, in one way or the other.
About the only difference I've actually seen from all the reports I've looked is eye color. And 9 times out of 10, the eye color is the dark yellow, the dead yellow look.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also been some I've read that's like crystal blue, black eyes.
Yeah, red eyes.
Red eyes, yeah.
It's a demon.
It's a demon. I mean, basically. And that makes me wonder, like, maybe it comes with age for the Dogman. Like, as you age, like, say, the little eyes from my story and how the one they encountered had breasts, what if the red eyes were cubs, you know?
Yeah, that could be possible too. I mean, it could just be like a mutation in the species.
It could be, yeah. Like
Where
a
you're-
bloodline, linear traits or something.
Yeah, where like you're seeing eye shine and not the true color of the eye.
Right.
But that's just speculation on our part. We don't really know,
We don't know exactly.
so to
It's like
speak.
it's all questions that need to be answered, but we can't answer them.
Yeah, just not by what we've looked at over the recent things. But so that leads the question. So do we agree that it is a living, breathing creature? Or is it something else?
Before I answer that, I want to mention a couple other things associated with it, like
Oh,
the
bringing
Dogman.
on more evidence at the last second, I see.
It's not necessarily evidence, but it's just like things to think about, like
Yeah.
myth, or like urban legends. There's your Dogman is what we're talking about. There's your werewolves that transform, but there's also how the story I talked about was in Louisiana. The French version of that's the Rougarou. Now, I can't tell you much about it because I've not researched it too much. But it's basically what the French werewolf.
Yeah, basically the Lougarou was the French version of it. The Rougarou was the Creole, where they kind of, from what I read about it, was where they kind of shortened it, made it easier to roll off your tongue.
Right.
So don't
So
take my word on that
English.
one. Yeah,
Lazy
basically,
French.
but more like lazy French.
Yeah.
So,
So
but that is actually coming in a later episode as well. We're looking into the Rougarou.
yeah, we're very looking. I look forward to looking into those for sure. But
So
I'd have to say my answer. I think there's definitely something out there, man. 100%. I think it's unexplained. I think it's really real and it's out there.
I believe there's a possibility.
So what's your percentage you think it would be a possibility?
Well, anything's really a possibility. I feel like there's more concrete evidence.
So you're saying you feel like there's more evidence pointing to it being a real thing or to it not being a real thing?
I do believe there is some truth to it. I do think that there are creatures.
Unexplained.
But well, like these that we've been discussing, all these stories and such.
Right.
So I would say yes.
I myself believe that it is truly a creature. It may have been more numerous, a couple thousand years ago.
Yeah. More of a real thing instead of like a rare occurrence.
Yeah, like more of these, where the account of 120 some thousand,
Right.
where
There's also the thing. It's like this world's vast. There's hiding places for everything, anywhere.
yeah, very true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even with like how much things have been civilized. I can't speak. I lost words. I'm below English. How much civilization? There's still hiding places right next door, in your backyard, in your sewers, in your tunnels, in the woods behind your house.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places for something to be seen that is still unseen.
So, you want to leave the floor open for questions from people who's watching for a little bit, then we'll go ahead and summarize it.
Absolutely. Like a good 5-10 minute Q&A.
Yeah.
That works.
If there's anyone watching, feel free to ask questions. We answer them the best we can.
If
not, think about it, reflect. We'll be here reflecting ourselves.
If not, we might be able to direct you to somebody who might be more knowledgeable than us.
Exactly.
So,
well, we go ahead and throw that link to the Dogman Society thing in chat.
American Dogman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
North American Dogman Project.
.com. And
I'll go ahead and post it right here.
If anybody has like any encounters or anything like that if they want to send it to them, there is an encounter section that they have on their website where you can report your own encounters, or you can contact us at 3DsAndTheUnknown at gmail.com. we are on Twitter at, what was it, 3Ds ATU.
ATU,
Yeah. And again, we'd like to thank Dogman Encounters Radio for what they do. I mean, I believe he also has an Encounters page if you want to tell your story verbally. The Cloaked Hedgehog, she has, or they have, I can't remember, I probably screwed that up so bad, but they have on their site, like I said, they have the world map with the world encounters, but there's also a blog describing, different types of dogmen, their theories on dogmen, like origins. And I seen one on one of the blogs where there was like a hyena type.
Oh, I remember talking. We talked about that one, yeah.
So
that's a very interesting one to look at.
And the last thing I have to credit is, again, godsandmonsters.com. And they have really good in-depth articles on different types of gods and monsters. So.
But if nobody's got any questions, we're going to probably cut it here. Talk about some stuff, discuss the upcoming episodes. Like he said, if you have any questions for us, you can email us at 3DsAndTheUnknown@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, which is 3DsATU on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, and don't forget, we're going to actually be posting all the live streams on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
Under, was it Drake Kingdom Gaming?
Gaming, yeah. Drake Kingdom Gaming.
Or, yeah.
Something
So,
like that, I can't remember.
We'll post a link if anybody would like it. We'll get it posted, so.
I can just look at it right here.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Switch count. It is just Drake Kingdom.
Well, that was Drake Kingdom Productions.
It is, but the actual channel is Drake Kingdom.
Okay. We will get it all situated, and I'm gonna try to get those up on Sundays, because with Twitch,
Fridays, post Sundays.
Yep. So we'll do the live streams on Fridays, and we'll post everything on YouTube by Sunday, hopefully, as long as everything goes well. And I think we may be we may upload the podcast version, and we'll post that in the description when we get more information about where that's actually going to be posted.
Right.
So.
Well, guess that wraps everything up. I'm Drunk Uncle Bulge.
I am Delphi.
I am Dark Sun 9.
Yep, and we appreciate y'all stopping by. We'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.